Our operators are meeting this very high standard to produce this resource cleaner, better, and safer than most anywhere on the planet. And they do that largely through technology, innovation, and just American ingenuity. They go out and try to solve their problems using engineering and all the things that you would expect scientists, geologists, and engineers to do.
Welcome to the OpEdge, the Gazette's opinion podcast, where we bring you cutting-edge perspectives from Colorado's top newsmakers, columnists, and more. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, investigative columnist and your host for today's program. Colorado is striving to meet its energy needs while also achieving, shall we say, ambitious objectives in the longer run of a net zero world. How can we achieve or get closer to those sorts of objectives while simultaneously meeting our energy needs? Is that possible? Let's dive into Colorado's energy economy with Dan Haley. He is the executive director of Coloradans for Responsible Energy Development. Dan, welcome to the OpEdge.
Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Before we move forward in our conversation, can you just give us a little bit of an eye into what CRED is about and how you work to achieve the objectives of, responsible energy development?
Sure. CRED is a Coloradans for Responsible Energy Development. We were started in 2013 by oil and gas companies here in Colorado as an organization to really advocate for the industry, but hopefully to inform Coloradans as to what's happening in our state, why we produce this resource here in Colorado, why it's important for our state and communities, and how we're doing it in ways that are safer, cleaner, and better than ever before. And so you'll see some of our advertisements on television, hopefully at night or through when you're on your computer and different things. We try different ways to get that information out to Coloradans, really just to better inform folks. We have a lot of people who are moving to the state who maybe are coming from states that haven't produced oil and gas. We have produced oil and gas in Colorado since before statehood, so people who have been here for a while are more accustomed to it and understand it a little bit better. People who are new to the state, we want to make sure we're giving them that information.
I don't think I realized that oil and gas production has happened in Colorado since before statehood, 150 years ago. That is remarkable. But let's talk about the oil and natural gas industry in Colorado. How is that in terms of the state's overall economy, in terms of jobs, in terms of wealth creation, and so forth?
Yeah, so we're an important player in the United States as far as oil and gas production goes. The United States is the number one producer of oil and natural gas in the world, which was unthinkable when I was growing up here in Colorado. Colorado is the fourth largest producer of oil in the country and the eighth largest producer of natural gas. Like I said, we've been around for a long time. We employ somewhere over 100,000 direct and indirect jobs here in Colorado, good paying jobs that you can get with a high school diploma, the kind of jobs that we used to have in more abundance in the United States. And we just don't have those types of jobs anymore, but we do have them here in this industry. We're a huge player for the economy in Colorado as well, and for the tax base in our state. The last time I saw a study on this was from the Common Sense Institute in 2023, I believe, that looked at the amount of tax dollars going back into things that we value in Colorado: parks, libraries, recreation centers, schools, to the tune of about $2 billion a year. Of that $2 billion, more than $400 million goes directly into classrooms across the state. So this is an economic generator. It's good for jobs, and it's good for our state.
You mentioned something that the oil and gas industry in particular has been producing energy cleaner, safer, more efficiently than ever before. I think that's such an important point to underscore and to understand a little bit more, given concerns over environmental issues, especially amongst the ruling policymakers in the state who have an objective of reducing carbon emissions.
Yes. Well, the environment is everybody's concern in Colorado. We live in a beautiful state. Like I said, I was born and raised here, raising my family here in this beautiful state. So from an oil and gas standpoint, we need to understand that. We need to understand that everybody cares about the environment, and we need to tell that story. And so what you're seeing happen in this industry is, as I said, we're producing these resources cleaner, better, and safer than ever. And we've got the data really to show that over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen methane emissions in Colorado overall come down by more than 70%, methane being a precursor to climate change. And so you see those methane emissions coming down by more than 70% in Colorado. In the DJ Basin, where we produce most of the oil and gas in our state, those emissions came down even more. Greenhouse gas emissions, you've seen those are being reduced at a great rate across the state. We are ahead of our targets that the state has set for us to reduce that greenhouse gas. And so that's being done through rules that have been applied at the state, but really through the technology and innovation that's happening out in the oil and gas industry. Our companies have invested millions of dollars into the latest and greatest cutting edge technology to make sure we're reducing our environmental footprint, reducing our emissions so we can be a better neighbor to the communities where we live and work.
Some would say this is government advanced, and maybe there's some of the regulatory aspect. But I think the oil and gas industry has a consumer incentive where the customer base has been looking for cleaner energy production, lower cost, more efficiency. And so there's that market incentive, right, that's really driving so much of the technological development and innovation that you were just talking about, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, Coloradans care about the environment and they want to see cleaner energy, and we're able to deliver that. And we're able to show those proof points to them. So I tell people all the time, if you care about the environment, you want this resource produced here in Colorado. The governor had put out a greenhouse gas roadmap of how to reduce these emissions. And if you go kind of to the back of it, they have a line in there about how they're not supporting a ban on oil and gas in Colorado because they understand if you were to ban this resource here in Colorado, it would just force us to import it from other states or other countries that don't have the same environmental protections that we do here. So I think it's just an important note that to show you the level of how we're producing it here and what Coloradans expect. The other thing that Coloradans expect is affordability and reliability. And I believe natural gas is an answer to those as well. It's cleaner, it's safer, and it is more affordable and reliable than other energy sources.
We'll come back to affordable and reliable in a moment. When it comes to natural gas, since we've been talking about emissions and so forth, a lot of people will look at natural gas who have the objective of long run achieving a net zero or heading in that direction as a transition fuel. So if you're looking at it from that vantage point, even then helping to achieve those objectives of reducing emissions, natural gas and the exportation of natural gas, even to other parts of the world, not just within the United States, will help to reduce that so-called carbon footprint quite substantially compared to other options.
Yeah, absolutely. Natural gas has been the fastest growing energy amount of energy on in the planet for the last 10, 15 years. And you see a lot of people who want to reduce their emissions will displace coal by using natural gas. So we really think that the natural gas developed here in the Rockies would love to see that exported out across the globe to our partners in the Pacific Rim and other places where you see, China, for example, India burning massive amounts of coal. If they could just change that and burn cleaner burning gas from the Rockies, right, you would see that that pollution number go down. There's a great website called windy.com that your listeners or viewers can go to. There's an app they can put on their phone, and you can really track different things and different pollution levels across the globe, and you'll see what's happening in China. You can see what's happening in India and the wind patterns that carry that into the United States, that carry that into Colorado. So it's to the benefit of all of us, people living here in Colorado and elsewhere across the planet, if more people were transitioning to that cleaner burning natural gas.
One of the big concerns for Coloradans, Dan Haley, is, of course, the reliability of energy, particularly when you have concerns about the electric grid. We have debates over expansions of data centers and meeting energy needs in that regard. We have discussions over, power shutoffs and so forth that happen on the utility side. But all of that relies upon well, reliable energy, that you can actually access those inputs, the resources that are available. Talk to us a little bit about how you view the reliability aspect and the cornerstone role of oil, but maybe particularly as far as electricity and things like that are concerned, natural gas.
Yeah, I think the first thing when we're having this conversation is you have to frame it in such a way that people understand the difference between energy and electricity. I hear people all the
Good point.
time interchanging those two things. Electricity is a form of energy, and for some of our regulators, it is the favored form of energy out there, and they want to see us electrifying more things. But how do you create that electricity in Colorado? Right now, natural gas continues to is an absolute workhorse for creating electricity, as is coal, frankly. Colorado has been ahead of the game in trying to get more renewables onto the grid than perhaps other states or other parts of the world. And there are times during the day, there's another app I'll refer your listeners or viewers to if they're interested called Electricity Maps, and it'll show you almost real time where your electricity is coming from across the country, but certainly here in Colorado, you can see Excel and different public service company, and you'll see that sometimes during the day when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, up to 50% of your electricity might be provided by renewables. Sun goes down, wind stops blowing, you'll see coal and natural gas become the workhorses that keep the grid viable. On those days when it's really hot and the wind's not blowing, coal and natural gas will keep your electricity on, which keeps your air conditioner working, etc. In the wintertime, when it's cold and gray, you'll see coal, natural gas as the workhorse, again, keeping the grid viable, powering your home, heating it mostly with natural gas in Colorado, certainly. But anyway, to the point being that you need natural gas in order to supply this electricity that we're trying to get more onto the grid, et cetera, as we look to go to this, net zero or whatever the case may be. So natural gas will continue to be a big player in this going forward. You see utilities when they file their rate plans at the PUC, they'll put in there that they need natural gas to keep the grid viable for the long foreseeable future.
Yeah, that is such an important point. And then we get to the affordability question that you raised. And that, I mean, with gas prices as they are, is certainly a significant issue. People trying to heat their homes and so forth. And there are a lot of legs to that in the sense that, of course, you have international global oil markets and gas
Hmm.
markets, and you have utility companies that are, as you just discussed, providing electricity or the natural gas or what have you, sometimes those vehicles for that. So there are a lot of layers here. When you look at the layers, when you look at the ability to provide affordable oil and gas to help meet energy needs for consumers, how does the industry meet that? How is it working to be affordable? And I ask this especially knowing, like, when we think about gasoline, you go to the pump, and now with what's happening with Iran and
Yeah.
geopolitical instability, we're heading closer to $5 a gallon
Yeah.
again.
Let's take those two things separately and let's look first at natural gas, which is a primary driver for heating our homes and powering our businesses in Colorado. Natural gas has been historically low over the last 20 years. Even when adjusted for inflation, you'll see this number going down. Natural gas has never been more affordable. So when your utility bills are going up, that is not because of natural gas, and I can show you the data to back that up. That's another discussion to have with utility folks about why the bills are going up. Gasoline, on the other side, is a product that is refined from oil. So when you see oil prices going up, you'll see gasoline prices following along with it. And it is cold comfort to say this to anybody because most everybody is concerned about affordability right now in Colorado and across the country. It is cold comfort to say, had we not been producing this resource in the United States, our oil would be even more expensive than it is today. We saw those prices spike up to about $120 a barrel because of what was happening in Iran. Had that happened 15, 20 years ago, that price would have been even higher because we are not producing our own resource here. And as I said, I know it's cold comfort when you're struggling to put the $5 or $4 gasoline into your car, but it could have been worse. So it's important that we continue to develop these resources in our country for energy security standpoints. We're never going to be fully energy independent as a country because we rely on some foreign oil to produce for gasoline because our refineries haven't been updated or changed in the last, many years. I don't think we've built a new refinery in this country since the 1970s. So we're going to always rely on some of that. So what I talk a lot about is energy security and really having the energy that we need here in this country and have reliable partners to help us with the rest of that. So you'll probably see those gasoline prices. This is not my area of expertise, but my understanding is those will probably persist in that $4 range for a bit longer. And it takes a while to catch up through the system based on what's being transported and being refined and then ultimately get out to the consumer. So you do see some high gasoline prices right now, but natural gas prices have been very affordable for a long time.
We have seen, Dan, since 2018, 2019, a significant increase in some aspects of the regulatory environment for oil and gas production. We have seen the expansion of Colorado as a regulatory state. In fact, we're the sixth most regulated state in the country, according to some metrics. And that in and of itself is a discussion for its own program. But in terms of oil and gas and the regulatory environment, and certainly the balancing act between regulations and energy production, and some of that being meeting consumer expectations, as we were talking about before. What can you tell us of the current regulatory state of affairs for energy production, oil and gas in particular in Colorado? How do you view that at the moment at CRED?
Yeah, I will try to be brief because I could talk for an hour about all the regulations that have been passed in the last, since 2019 in Colorado. In the last 6 years, industry has participated in more than 50 rulemakings on oil and gas issues or energy issues or broader concerned issues. From briefly 2010 to 2019, we had about one rulemaking a year, and that was unprecedented across the country for oil and gas producing
Wow.
states. And that was just one a year. Since 2019, we've had multiple every year. Senate Bill 181, signed by Governor Polis in April of 2019, set into motion more than a dozen rulemakings that took almost 5 years or maybe a little over 5 years to complete. Every single aspect of our industry has been under the regulatory microscope in the last 6, 7 years, and everything has been regulated that can be regulated. And there are still rulemakings happening this year, and more planned for the future. So this has been kind of nonstop ever since 2019, but really kicked into motion in 2010. That has, at one point when I was at the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, we were using the state's own numbers to determine how much that costs industry, and we got up to almost $750 million a year in new costs of doing business in Colorado just to comply with those rules. So you'll see shifts in industry because of that. Larger companies can comply with those rules a little easier than smaller companies can. It's just an issue of scales. So there have been impacts on industry certainly since that has taken place. But the goal of industry is to meet those standards and in many cases exceed them. And we're seeing our operators do that in Colorado. Again, I use these words all the time, but they're true. Our operators are meeting this very high standard to do this, to produce this resource cleaner, better, and safer than most anywhere on the planet. And they do that largely through technology, innovation, and just American ingenuity. I mean, they go out and try to solve their problems using engineering and all the things that you would expect scientists, geologists, and engineers to do.
When you look at the regulatory environment, you're talking about all these rulemakings every year, dozens and dozens of rulemakings. Is the greatest challenge for industry to meet those objectives? Is part of that the cost? Is it the uncertainty of ever-changing rules? What are some of the challenges of meeting the expectations that keep changing for industry in this state?
Yeah, the changing nature of the rules is one of the biggest challenges. I think if you talk to anybody in business, they will say, we just want to know what the rules are. And this is applicable not just to oil and gas, but to businesses across the state. Just
Yes.
tell us where the bar is, and we will do all we can to clear that bar. But when it's constantly changing, it's hard to get investment into the state for people who want to know, are you going to be able to do this or not? So there have been a lot of those issues that have come up in recent years that make it difficult to comply with these things. But it's I never underestimate the ability of people in our industry to engineer and solve the problems that we're facing every day.
When you talk about responsible energy development and advancing affordable, reliable energy, one big discussion point that isn't oil and gas, but is something else, has been increasing the potential for nuclear power in Colorado and around the country. How do you guys view that, especially because, for example, the Gazette has very much editorialized in favor, as Secretary of Energy Chris Wright has put forward, an all of the above energy approach of let's take all of these different aspects with the goal being reliability and affordability and accessing
Yeah.
electricity, gasoline, all of those energy
Yeah,
needs.
I don't know that we have an official stance on that, and I certainly don't advocate for nuclear, but I think it needs to be at the table when we talk about solving our energy and electricity issues. We need more energy. We need better energy. I was sitting on a panel a couple months ago, and the CEO of of Energy Outreach Colorado mentioned that 20 to 25% of the people in the San Luis Valley in Colorado burn wood for heat for their homes. And so I don't think people even understand that we're still utilizing some of the energy sources that we utilized, during the Revolutionary War here in Colorado and across the country. So as we start talking about things like data centers and things that are going to need more energy, need more electricity, that will, add more to the grid, then we need to be talking about bringing all energy sources to the table and having a discussion about how we can do this in ways that are efficient and affordable and reliable. Because at the end of the day, that's really what people want. Is I don't think anybody really cares like I want coal, I want natural gas, I want this. They want their lights to come on, they want to have their air conditioner working, they want to live their lives and not have to worry about these things. When we get to a spot where the grid is maxed or taxed, then and you start having, what happens in California, rolling brownouts. California has people who die in the summertime from heat exhaustion because their air conditioner is out, or die or freeze to death in the wintertime. That should not be something that happens in the United States. We have the energy we need. We have the energy to keep the grid viable, to keep our air conditioner on, to keep our heat on in the wintertime. We shouldn't be talking about people dying through the lack of energy or electricity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But one thing that we're seeing increasing discussion about, I find so interesting, is Europeans coming to the United
Yeah.
States for the World Cup have enjoyed air conditioning that is sorely lacking in Europe. And they got a dose of that and increasingly are having discussions across the pond about how to expand access to air conditioning because, as you said, it actually is about
Yeah.
saving lives as much as
Yeah.
comfort.
In England, they are importing wood from the United States, which then gets shipped in pellet form across the ocean, and it is burned in power plants for power in England in the 21st century because they won't
Wow.
allow hydraulic fracturing in their country. And so we're growing trees and wood and sending it to them for power.
That's crazy. With the hydraulic fracture, we just got a few minutes left with you, Dan Haley. But with fracking, um, there's so many misnomers out there about the safety of hydraulic fracturing and how that actually works in terms of water quality and fire risk and all of those sorts of things. Can you address a couple of those things that you constantly
Sure.
hear about that process that don't necessarily line up with how things actually
Yeah,
work?
hydraulic fracturing has been around for a long time, and what's happened is activists have really taken that name. In fact, they're the ones that put the K in fracking. When you look at reports and different things done by industry, it's hydraulic fracturing or fracking without a K, but they put the K in there because it sounds dirty and they can really market it. And so they have created a lot of the issues here around hydraulic fracturing, which is, as I said, has been done for a long time. It is a short process. They'll make everything about fracking. They'll call them fracking rigs and fracking sites. Hydraulic fracturing takes place over a small amount of time in the life cycle of a well, a couple days for a well that might be there for 30 years. And you hydraulically fracture using a lot of water, sand, and a very small amount of chemicals. Less than 1% of that is chemicals, which are all disclosed on websites powered by by the state of Colorado. And so it takes place more than a mile below the surface of the earth. Most aquifers are 150, 250 feet deep, and we're a mile below water sources, fracturing the rock to release the oil and gas to the surface. The Obama administration, EPA, in 2015 came out with a report that said they found no widespread damages in uh, water supplies from hydraulic fracturing in 2015. They studied it for more than a year. The state of Colorado has never found anything where drinking water has been contaminated by the process of hydraulic fracturing. And so it is a safe process that's been done, is done, all the time in Colorado, but it has just gotten, the activists have just sort of, gotten carried away and they use it to scare people. And again, so from an industry standpoint, we need to understand that. We need to understand that people are out there trying to scare people with bad information. And so we need to be available to provide them the information they need so they can make good decisions for their family, show them, not just tell them, show them how we're doing this every single day, all the precautions that go into hydraulic fracturing, into drilling the multiple layers of steel and cement casing that go to protect water aquifers, to protect our communities. And so it's an opportunity for us to have this conversation and to make sure that people understand that this process is safe.
Finally, Dan, before we let you go, let's talk for a moment about sort of the bottom line. If you could distill our discussion down into the bottom line of what it takes to have responsible, affordable, and reliable energy here in Colorado, what is that bottom line?
From my standpoint, it is not picking winners and losers. It's letting everybody come to the table and determine how we can build a grid that works for our future, that allows us to have the energy that we need, that allows us to supply the energy in ways that are efficient and affordable and reliable. We have the resources we need in this state to do all of those things. We need the political will to use them.
Dan Haley, Executive Director of Coloradans for Responsible Energy Development. Thanks for joining us on the OpEdge.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the OpEdge. If you enjoyed today's episode, please drop us a like, subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. For the Gazette, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger.